Jace Montero wiped his greasy hands on the rag that had seen better centuries, muttering about the infernal laws of interstellar maintenance. The docking bay around him hummed with the low buzz of ion thrusters, the occasional hiss of plasma welders, and the faint squeak of a service droid whose wheel alignment was clearly a cosmic joke. He glanced at the armor before him, a shimmering exosuit that looked like it had been plucked from a galactic opera, all polished cerulean plates and delicate filigree. Lysera, the owner, or rather, the ruler who apparently had chosen him as the royal repairman, was watching over his shoulder, her long ears catching the light in a way that made them look almost sentient. "So," she said, tilting her head in that way that suggested she knew secrets no one else did, "you think you can make it function again without, how do you say, turning it into a glorified space coffin?" Daze coughed. "I'm pretty sure I can, unless of course it's cursed, which might explain the glow." He jabbed a finger at a faintly pulsating plate. "See, definitely alive." Lysera arched an eyebrow, the long ear closest to him twitching like it had a mind of its own. "Alive or not, it needs to be ready for the ceremonial convergence. A failure would be socially awkward." "Socially awkward," Jace echoed. "I mean its armor, not your choice of dance partner." "You humans always underestimate ceremony," she said, but a small smile betrayed amusement. The docking bay doors hissed as a group of emissaries from 3 different star systems drifted in, glancing curiously at the spectacle. Jace quickly realized that his audience wasn't just his curiosity-fueled coworkers. These beings were watching a mechanic attempt to appease the most important figure in the quadrant while she inspected him like a particularly slow-moving puzzle. He swallowed, wishing he'd remembered to bring more than sarcastic comments and a welding kit. And then, in the middle of tightening a microgyroscope that he was pretty sure shouldn't exist on a piece of armor, Lysera leaned closer, the long ears brushing against the air in a whisper of elegance, and said, "Will you be my husband?" The universe seemed to hiccup. A vendor dropped a tray of synth fruit, a maintenance droid tipped sideways and rolled into a pile of cargo crates, and a xenolizard, because of course there was a xenolizard, skittered across the polished floor in terror. Jace froze, holding a screwdriver like a weapon that might just fail him in this critical moment. What?" was all he could manage, and even that sounded absurd to his own ears. Lysera's eyes sparkled with something dangerous and humorous at the same time. "I asked if you would join me in matrimony, publicly." Jace's mind attempted a logical breakdown. Matrimony, queen of an alien species, public, right. Step 1, breathe. Step 2, don't faint. Step 3, check if anyone had secretly installed a laugh track. Step 4, contemplate how the hell one even says no to someone who could apparently annihilate you with a glare that could bend gravity. "Oh well," he stammered, jabbing the screwdriver into the nearest piece of armor for support. "I usually start my relationships with, coffee first. Or maybe a test flight in a vacuum chamber." Lysera tilted her head, clearly amused. "Coffee is inadequate for interstellar royalty. You'll need to understand the nuances of court etiquette, starship piloting, and at least 3 languages you have never spoken. And yet you joke." "Humor is my coping mechanism," Jace replied, pointing at a floating holographic display of his own panicked expression, which he had accidentally triggered. "And apparently my only defense against being proposed to in front of half the quadrant." Lysera laughed, a musical sound that bounced across the docking bay and set several small grav balloons wobbling. The sound was disarming. "Perhaps humor will serve you well." By the time he realized he was supposed to respond, the emissaries were whispering, the xenolizard had disappeared under a crate, and a small drone had broadcasted the entire moment across local news feeds. Jace's face was probably trending in at least 4 star systems by now. He could practically see the memes forming, mechanic versus alien queen, who wore the armor better. Jace swallowed and tried to regain composure. "Look, I'm honored and terrified. Also, I don't even own a formal suit or a spaceship or a clue about court politics. But hey, at least I can fix your armor." Lysera's smile widened. "Fixing my armor is the first test. Remaining useful while surrounded by intrigue, gossip, and interstellar absurdity will be the next." She stepped back, allowing her long ears to sway dramatically in the artificial gravity field, giving the impression of a very elegant, slightly judgmental cat. "Do not worry, Jace Montero, you will adapt or amuse." Mostly a moose, probably, he muttered, crouching to adjust a kinetic stabilizer. A spark jumped, tingling his fingertips. And I've got plenty of experience in that department. The armor finally hummed to life, glowing faintly and responding to the slightest touch, and Jace allowed himself a small, victorious grin. Lysera clapped once, her long ears flicking with approval. Well done. Perhaps I was too hasty with my question, but no, this moment will not be erased. You human are now part of my ongoing concerns. Which, Jace realized as he wiped his sweaty palms again, was a polite way of saying he was officially in over his head. Over the course of the next several hours, he discovered that being a mechanic was simpler than navigating royal gossip, interstellar law, and a public proposal. There was paperwork, lots of paperwork, most of it in languages he couldn't pronounce, let alone read. There were banquet rehearsals where the appetizers were technically sentient. And there was the constant danger of accidentally breaking ceremonial rules, which could trigger anything from mild embarrassment to full-scale diplomatic incidents. He survived, somehow, armed with sarcasm, a soldering kit, and a growing sense that life would never be ordinary again. And somewhere in the midst of exploding grav balloons and floating fruit, he realized that this absurd, chaotic, and utterly impossible situation might just be fun, or terrifying, probably both. Either way, there was no going back. Jace woke to the faint vibration of the orbital station thrumming beneath his feet, the hum of energy conduits mingling with the occasional sneeze of a maintenance bot. He blinked at the holographic alarm hovering over his bunk. It was a polite reminder that he was now officially part of the royal entourage. He groaned, rubbing his eyes, and glanced at the small note projected in midair. Ceremonial court training, 900 hours. Attendance mandatory, humor optional. Jace immediately appreciated the honesty. Humor might be optional, but surviving Lysera's court without it was apparently impossible. He dressed quickly, slipping into a jumpsuit that smelled faintly of coolant and regret, and headed to the palace atrium. Lysera was already there, levitating slightly above the floor, her long ears flicking with amusement. "Good morning, Jace," she said, her voice melodic but laced with something that suggested minor mischief. "Today you learn how to bow, nod, and speak correctly in 5 alien languages. Do not fail. Or do fail spectacularly, both entertainments are acceptable." 5 languages, Jace muttered under his breath, thinking of all the ways this could go wrong. "I barely survive with one." He followed her into the grand hall, where holographic projectors displayed swirling constellations, star charts, and diplomatic schedules that could make anyone dizzy. There were emissaries from dozens of species, some humanoid, some decidedly not, all staring at him with a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and outright amusement. He realized immediately that his strategy would be to smile, nod, and hope for the best. The first lesson was bowing, which proved trickier than expected. Some species expected a low bend at the knees, others required a 180-degree lean at the waist, and a few insisted on rolling on the floor while maintaining eye contact. Jace tried a hybrid approach and ended up somewhere between a polite nod and a horizontal tumble, narrowly missing a grav lantern. Lysera's ears twitched, and she let out a laugh that sounded like chimes in zero gravity. "Creativity counts," she said. "I may even promote you for that." Next came language training. Jace had been prepared for a struggle, but nothing could have prepared him for the trilingual insult that accidentally came out of his mouth when trying to say "good morning" in Lysera's native tongue. The emissaries snickered, the xenolizard that had escaped last chapter reappeared on the floor, hissing at him in solidarity, and Jace desperately tried to recover. It's a compliment," he said, waving his hands wildly. Lysera's amused expression said it all. The queen had decided that humor, panic, and creativity were interchangeable tools of diplomacy, and Jace was excelling at all 3 simultaneously. After that, the training escalated to piloting exercises. Lysera insisted that if he was to survive as her consort, he had to navigate a royal starship through asteroid fields, black hole-adjacent nebulae, and random pirate activity. "Think of it as extreme video gaming," she said. "But mistakes are expensive and potentially explosive." Jace, gripping the controls with sweaty palms, immediately began using sarcasm to calm himself. "Ah yes, because nothing says romance like narrowly avoiding annihilation while your queen judges your reflexes." And then, of course, came the social etiquette drills. They practiced sitting at high-gravity tables without floating, eating sentient hors d'oeuvres without causing interstellar incidents, and using polite expressions that were half compliments and half threats. Jace discovered that Lysera had a particularly sharp sense of humor. Every time he accidentally insulted a visiting dignitary, she'd whisper something in his ear that made him laugh despite the risk of diplomatic disaster. Her long ears swiveled in approval when he cracked a joke about gravy being sentient and possibly judging my table manners, and even a grumpy three-eyed diplomat chuckled. Midway through the day, Lysera decided it was time for Jace to attend a meeting with her advisory council, a group of beings who were equal parts terrifying, brilliant, and ridiculous. One advisor, a translucent entity that shimmered like liquid starlight, floated in front of him and asked a question in a language that sounded like whistling wind through metal pipes. Jace panicked and gestured wildly, accidentally hitting the console that controlled the room's lighting. The room went dark, then pulsed with rainbow colors, accompanied by an alarm that sounded suspiciously like a laugh track. "Ah," Jace said, bowing awkwardly in every style he could remember. "My answer is yes, no, and possibly maybe." The advisors blinked, some silently judging, some clearly entertained, and Lysera clapped once, her long ears fanning out dramatically. "He is unconventional and amusing, that counts for something." Lunch, if it could be called that, involved navigating a zero-gravity banquet where the food occasionally tried to float off the plates in protest. Jace managed to catch a piece of antimatter fruit before it collided with a diplomat's head, only to discover that it spontaneously glowed and hummed when touched. Lysera leaned close, her breath warm, long ears brushing his shoulder. "You are surprisingly adept at chaos management," she said. "I may have underestimated you or overestimated the universe." By mid-afternoon, Jace had learned several things. 1. Never trust a diplomatic hologram that looks like a cat but is actually a translator. 2. Humor is the only universal language. 3. Lysera's long ears seemed to twitch whenever he made a particularly clever pun, which he took as encouragement. And 4. Life as a royal mechanic consort was terrifying, ridiculous, and far more entertaining than he ever could have imagined. The day ended with a ceremonial repair of the palace's anti-gravity stabilizers, a delicate operation that required him to balance on a narrow ledge while Lysera hovered beside him, offering advice in the form of playful critiques. "A bit too left," she said. "No, lower, don't make me intervene with my psychic projection." Jace grinned, deliberately nudging the stabilizer too far just to watch her react with mock horror. As the station's artificial sun dipped behind the docking bay, casting long, glittering shadows, Jace realized he was exhausted, exhilarated, and strangely happy. He had survived his first full day as Lysera's human consort, navigating alien politics, gravity-defying meals, and interstellar chaos, all without accidentally committing treason. Mostly, Lysera floated beside him, long ears flicking in satisfaction. "Tomorrow," she said, "we escalate. There will be diplomacy, espionage simulations, and possibly sentient dessert. Humor will not only be appreciated, it will be required." Jace groaned, imagining what that could entail, but he couldn't suppress a grin. "Bring it on," he said. "I've got sarcasm, panic, and questionable logic at my disposal." Lysera's laugh echoed down the hall, a sound that promised more chaos, more danger, and strangely enough, more fun than Jace had ever expected. The human mechanic had officially stepped into a world where absurdity, diplomacy, and romance collided in zero gravity, and somehow he was ready. Jace awoke to the low hum of the orbital station's mainframe, the kind of hum that made your teeth vibrate in sympathy and your brain wonder why it had been a good idea to sleep near a quantum core. Today, though, he didn't groan. He sat up, stretched, and muttered, "Let's see if the universe is ready for me to crash it today." A holographic reminder flickered in the air, diplomatic summit with the Trivoid Council. Attendance and charm mandatory. Jace frowned. Charm had never been on his resume, unless you counted making sarcastic quips while almost electrocuting yourself with alien tools. He rose, brushing coolant-stained hair from his face, and headed toward the palace atrium where Lysera floated, impossibly elegant as always, her long ears twitching in rhythm with the station's subtle vibrations. "Good morning," she said, her voice warm but tinged with amusement. I trust you slept, or at least dreamed about accidentally offending a foreign power. I dreamt they were all cats with laser eyes, Jace replied. Does that count? Lysera's ears flicked and a small smile curved her lips. Close enough. Now let's prepare for today. You will need to speak, negotiate, and survive simultaneously. By the time they arrived at the summit chamber, Jace had begun to notice subtle changes in himself. He no longer panicked at every alien tongue or grav-shifting floor panel. Humor had become a weapon, his wit a shield. He could translate panic into strategy and sarcasm into charm. The emissaries waited, some skeptical, some curious, and others outright entertained by the human who had been publicly proposed to by the galaxy's most influential queen. Lysera leaned down, whispering in his ear, her long ears brushing his shoulder. Remember, the stakes are high. A mistake could trigger conflict or laughter. Both are dangerous. Jace nodded. I think I can handle one of those. The meeting began. The Trivoid Council, a coalition of 3 rival alien factions, hovered in the chamber, their bodies shimmering, shifting, and occasionally defying gravity altogether. One emissary, a crystalline being that refracted the chamber's lights into dizzying rainbows, raised a tentacle. Jace panicked slightly and instinctively waved, accidentally triggering the chamber's holographic display, which projected a 3D map of the galaxy and a floating caricature of himself juggling various alien artifacts. A pause, then laughter, not mockery, not tension-laden relief, but real laughter. Jace blinked. Lysera's ears twitched in approval and the crystalline emissary's facets shimmered in what could only be interpreted as amusement. Your human is entertaining, one of the council members said, perhaps useful. Jace seized the moment. I may not know all the proper phrases, he admitted, gesturing at the map, but I can assure you, if we work together, we'll keep the black hole generators in their lanes and the pirate raids optional. Another laugh. Lysera's long ears swiveled, the subtle twitching betraying her pride. The summit proceeded with a mix of serious negotiation and carefully deployed absurdity. Jace used humor to navigate tense moments, deflecting insults with jokes and turning technical glitches into opportunities for diplomacy. A misfired grav field projector sent a minor delegation floating upside down, and Jace quipped, "Gravity is merely a suggestion here." The council erupted in laughter. Even the most stoic members softened, allowing compromises that would have been impossible without his intervention. By the time the summit ended, trade routes were stabilized, alliances tentatively formed, and Jace's reputation as the human who could charm a black hole was cemented in interstellar news feeds. Afterward, Lysera guided him to the palace's observation deck, where the stars stretched infinitely, flickering like tiny beacons of possibility. She floated beside him, long ears glinting in starlight, a rare softness in her eyes. You've changed, she said. From a mechanic who panicked at every ceremonial hiccup to someone who can survive politics, interstellar chaos, and my sense of humor. I've learned from the best, Jace replied. And from near-death experiences, sentient desserts, and your long ears twitching at just the right moment. Lysera laughed, a sound that echoed across the deck like chiming bells. You've earned your place, Jace. Not just as my consort, but as someone who understands this galaxy in ways most diplomats never will. They stood in silence, the stars spinning overhead, until Lysera touched his hand, her long fingers warm and surprisingly grounding. The proposal wasn't just a spectacle, she said. It was a bridge. You and I together symbolize the connection between our worlds. You've proven that humor, courage, and a certain human stubbornness can change the course of alliances, hearts, and perhaps even history. Jace blinked, taking it in. He thought of the chaos of his first day, the glowing armor, the floating fruit, the xenolizard that had hissed at him, the accidental insults, and the near-fatal gravity mishaps. He thought of the long, long days filled with training, diplomacy, and absurd situations that somehow demanded creativity as much as skill. And he realized that he had changed. He was no longer just a mechanic fixing machines. He was a participant in the galaxy's great, messy, beautiful dance. So, he said, looking at her, does this mean I get hazard pay for marriage? Lysera's long ears twitched in amusement. You get the galaxy, she said simply, and dessert. Especially dessert, she replied, laughing. Jace smiled, leaning into the warmth of her presence. The palace, the station, the political chaos, they were all still there, still challenging, still absurd. but he had learned to navigate it with humor, courage, and the occasional well